In the brutal cold of the frontier, the wealthiest and most powerful man in the West had built walls no woman could breach. Caleb Thornridge rejected every polished daughter sent by ambitious families, turning away fortune after fortune with nothing but ice in his eyes. They called him untouchable. They called him heartless. But when a quiet stranger arrived alone on horseback one frozen morning, carrying no charm and no ambition, only brutal honesty, everything he'd sworn to protect began to crack. This is their story. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The wind that winter didn't just blow, it cut. It came howling down from the mountain passes with teeth sharp enough to strip bark from trees, and it turned the Thornridge land into something close to a proving ground. Cattle huddled in tight knots near the windbreaks. Ranch hands moved between buildings with their heads down and their collars up. And Caleb Thornridge stood at the window of his study, watching it all with the same expression he wore for damn near everything. Nothing. Not cold. Not warm. Just nothing. The house behind him was too big. Always had been. 3 stories of timber and stone that his father built and his grandfather had dreamed about. Sitting at the end of a long drive lined with cottonwoods that looked like skeletons this time of year. Inside, the floors were dark wood, the furniture heavy and expensive, the kind of place that made visitors lower their voices without being told. Caleb had inherited it all when he was 26. The land, the cattle, the reputation. That was 11 years ago. He'd doubled the size of the operation since then, bought out 2 neighboring spreads, and turned the Thornridge name into something people either respected or resented, depending on which side of a deal they were on. He didn't care which. What he cared about was that the work got done, the cattle stayed healthy, and people left him the hell alone when the day was over. That last part was getting harder. Mr. Thornridge? He didn't turn from the window. What? His foreman, Jack Ridley, stood in the doorway holding his hat in both hands like he was about to ask for a loan. Jack was 50-something, weathered as old leather, and one of the few men on the ranch who'd known Caleb's father. That bought him a little more leeway than most, but not much. The Pritchard girl's arriving this afternoon. Caleb's jaw tightened. I know. Her father sent word ahead, says she's educated, well-mannered, plays the piano. Good for her. Jack shifted his weight. Boss, I ain't trying to tell you your business. Then don't. But this is the 4th one in 6 months. Caleb finally turned, and Jack took half a step back without meaning to. It wasn't that Caleb was particularly big, though he was tall enough and broad enough to make a point when he needed to. It was the eyes, pale gray like winter sky, and about as warm. You got something to say, Jack? Just that folks are starting to talk. Let them. They're saying you're turning down every eligible woman west of the Mississippi, saying maybe you're... He stopped. Maybe I'm what? Jack cleared his throat. Nothing. Forget it. Say it. They're wondering if you even want a wife at all. Caleb stared at him for a long moment, then turned back to the window. I don't. Not the kind they keep sending. What kind do you want, then? The kind that doesn't exist. Jack opened his mouth, closed it, then put his hat back on. I'll make sure the guest room's ready. Don't bother, she won't be staying. Her father's expecting, I don't care what he's expecting. Send her back before supper. Jack left without another word, and Caleb went back to watching the wind tear across his land like it was trying to claw something loose. Victoria Pritchard arrived at 2 o'clock in a carriage that cost more than most men made in 5 years. She was 22, blonde, and beautiful in the kind of way that required effort. Perfect posture, perfect smile, dress that probably took 3 people to get her into. Her father climbed out after her, a thick man with mutton chops and a watch chain, already talking before his boots hit the ground. Mr. Thornridge, an honor, sir, a genuine honor. I've heard so much about your operation here. Truly impressive. This is my daughter, Victoria. Finest education money can buy. Boarding school in Boston, finishing school in Philadelphia. Speaks 3 languages, plays piano, harp, and violin. And I dare say she's easy on the eyes, wouldn't you agree? Caleb stood on the porch with his arms crossed. Mr. Pritchard. Victoria stepped forward and extended a gloved hand, tilting her head just so. Mr. Thornridge, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Father's told me so much. He didn't take her hand. I'm sure he has. Her smile faltered for half a second before snapping back into place. She lowered her hand slowly, folding it with the other in front of her. I hope the journey wasn't too inconvenient for you to accommodate. It wasn't, because you're not staying. Her father's face went red. Now see here. I appreciate you making the trip, but I'm not interested. You can stay the night if the weather's too rough to head back, but come morning, I'd appreciate it if you moved on. Victoria's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her father sputtered. This is highly irregular. We had an understanding. You had an understanding. I didn't. I've invested considerable time and expense. That's your problem, not mine. Pritchard took a step forward, puffing up like a rooster. Do you have any idea who I am? Yeah, a man who's about to get back in his carriage. For a second, it looked like Pritchard might take a swing. His fists clenched, his jaw worked, and the vein in his temple stood out like a river on a map. But then he looked at Caleb's face, really looked, and whatever he saw there made him take a step back instead. You'll regret this, Pritchard said, voice shaking. You'll regret turning away every decent offer that comes your way. One day, you'll be old and alone in this big empty house, and you'll remember this moment. Caleb's expression didn't change. Probably. He turned and walked back inside, leaving them standing in the cold. That night he sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he wasn't drinking and a ledger he wasn't reading. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing shadows that climbed the walls and made the room feel even bigger than it was. Jack knocked once and came in without waiting for an answer. He'd been doing that for years. They're gone, Jack said. Good. Pritchard said some things on his way out, none of them kind. I'll survive. Jack pulled up a chair without being invited and sat down with a grunt. You want to tell me what the hell you're doing? Working. Bullshit. You've been staring at that same page for 20 minutes. Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've known you since you were 16 years old, Caleb. I watched you take over this place when your daddy died. Watched you build it into something even bigger. You're a lot of things, but stupid ain't one of them. So why are you turning away every woman who comes through that door? Caleb set the glass down. Because they don't want me. They want this. He gestured at the room, the house, the land beyond the walls. So, most marriages start with less. I don't want a business arrangement. Then what do you want? Caleb stared into the fire. Something real. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, soft, You mean someone who wants you the way Sarah did? The name landed like a fist. Caleb's hand tightened on the armrest, knuckles going white. Don't. It's been 8 years. I said don't. You can't keep punishing every woman who walks through that door just because one of them broke your heart. Caleb stood up fast enough that the chair scraped loud against the floor. She didn't break my heart, Jack. She ripped it out, showed it to me, and then walked away laughing. So yeah, forgive me if I'm not in a hurry to hand it over again. Jack stood too, slower. What she did was wrong. Nobody's arguing that. But you're letting it turn you into something you're not. And what's that? A coward. The word hung between them like smoke. Caleb's voice went dangerously quiet. Get out. Jack put his hat on and headed for the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and looked back. For what it's worth, I don't think you're scared of getting hurt again. I think you're scared of wanting something that much in the first place. But it was somebody. He left. Caleb stood there alone, the fire burning low, and didn't move for a long time. The next morning broke cold and clear. Caleb was up before dawn like always, pulling on his boots in the dark and heading down to the barn while the sky was still more black than blue. The work didn't care about his mood, and he preferred it that way. Mucking stalls, checking fence lines, riding out to move cattle. It was all simple. Physical. It didn't ask questions. He was saddling his horse when he heard it, hoofbeats coming up the drive. He stopped, one hand on the saddle, and listened. Single rider. Moving steady, not fast. Probably someone from town with a message, or maybe one of the hands coming back from an errand. But when he walked out of the barn, what he saw made him freeze. A woman on horseback, sitting tall in the saddle, riding alone. No carriage, no entourage. No father, just her. She was still 100 yards out, but even from that distance, Caleb could tell she wasn't like the others. She wore trousers and a men's coat, hat pulled low, hair tied back in a braid that hung down between her shoulder blades. She rode like someone who'd been doing it her whole life, easy, confident, like the horse was an extension of herself. Jack came out of the bunkhouse, saw her, and shot Caleb a look. "You expecting someone?" "No." "Want me to send her off?" Caleb didn't answer. He was too busy watching her ride closer, something tightening in his chest that he didn't have a name for. She stopped 20 feet away and swung down from the saddle in one smooth motion. When she straightened and pushed her hat back, Caleb got his first good look at her face. She wasn't beautiful. Not in the way Victoria Pritchard had been beautiful, all carefully arranged angles and expensive polish. This woman's face was lean and sun-browned, with lines at the corners of her eyes that said she'd spent a lot of time squinting into hard weather. Her mouth was set in a line that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite a frown, just neutral, waiting. Her eyes, though. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and when they met his, they didn't look away. "Caleb Thornridge?" she said. Her voice was low, steady, not trying to charm or impress, just asking. "Yeah," he said. "My name's Eliza Hart." She didn't offer her hand, didn't curtsy or smile or do any of the things the other women had done. She just stood there, holding her horse's reins, and waited. Caleb crossed his arms. "If you're here looking for a husband, you're wasting your time." "I'm not." "Then what do you want?" She looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted, just a little, like she was deciding how much truth to tell. "I heard you've been turning away every woman who comes to your door," she said. "Figured you might be tired of the act." "The act!" "The charm, the flattery, the whole performance." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm not here to perform, I'm here to talk." Jack let out a low whistle and walked back toward the bunkhouse, shaking his head. Caleb didn't move. "Talk about what? Whatever you want, or nothing at all. Up to you." "And if I say no?" She shrugged. "Then I'll get back on my horse and leave. No hard feelings." He studied her, looking for the catch. There was always a catch. Some angle, some hidden agenda, some reason she was really here. But all he saw in her face was patience. "Why?" he said finally. "Why what? Why do you care?" Eliza looked past him, out at the land stretching cold and empty under the pale morning sky. When she looked back, there was something in her eyes that made his chest tighten again. "Because I know what it's like," she said quietly, "to be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone." The words hit harder than they should have. Caleb opened his mouth to tell her to leave, to get the hell off his property and take her pity with her. But what came out instead was, "You want coffee?" She blinked, surprised, then nodded. "Yeah, I do." They sat at the kitchen table, which felt strange. Caleb couldn't remember the last time he'd had a guest in the kitchen. Most visitors got the sitting room, all formal and stiff. But Eliza had followed him in like it was the most natural thing in the world, and now she sat across from him with her hands wrapped around a tin mug, steam rising between them. "You live around here?" he asked. "About 30 miles east, small place, just me." "No family?" "Not anymore." She said it without emotion, like she was stating a fact about the weather. Caleb recognized the tone. He used it himself. "How'd you hear about me?" he asked. "People talk. Word gets around." She took a sip of coffee, watching him over the rim. "They say you're the richest man in 3 counties. They say you've turned down more marriage proposals than most men get in a lifetime. They say you're cold, heartless, impossible to please. And you rode 30 miles to see if it was true?" "No, I rode 30 miles because I figured most of it was bullshit." That surprised a laugh out of him, short and sharp, rusty from disuse. Eliza's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're not heartless. You're just careful. There's a difference." "You figured that out in 5 minutes?" "I figured it out before I got here. A heartless man doesn't build the kind of operation you have, doesn't keep his people fed and paid through hard winters, doesn't turn away women kindly when he could just slam the door in their faces. I'm not always kind about it." "No, but you're not cruel either. You're just tired." The accuracy of it made him uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, looking away. You don't know me. Not yet. Not ever. I don't do this. Do what? Let strangers in. I'm not asking you to let me in, Eliza said. I'm just asking you to let me sit here. They were quiet for a while. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and somewhere deeper in the house, a clock ticked steadily. Caleb stared into his coffee, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. This woman had shown up out of nowhere, with no agenda he could identify, and now she was sitting in his kitchen like she belonged there. It should have made him angry. Instead, it just made him tired. Why are you really here? He said. Eliza set her mug down and looked at him straight. Because I spent 5 years married to a man who never once asked me what I wanted, who saw me as something to own, not someone to know, and when he died, I thought I'd feel free. But I didn't. I just felt empty. Her voice didn't waver, didn't crack. She just laid it out there, raw and plain. I rebuilt my life, she continued. Learned to run the land myself, learned to survive without needing anyone. And I got good at it, real good. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to connect with someone, to talk to another person and feel like they actually saw me. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So when I heard about you, this man who keeps everyone at arm's length, who doesn't trust anyone who wants something from him, I thought maybe you'd understand. Maybe you're the one person who wouldn't expect me to perform either. Caleb stared at her. That's it? You just want someone to talk to? Yeah. There are easier people to talk to than me. Probably. But I don't want easy. I want honest. He didn't know what to say to that. Eliza stood up, draining the last of her coffee. I should go. I've taken up enough of your morning. You just got here. And I said what I came to say. She pulled her hat on, adjusting the brim. If you want to talk again, I'll be back in a few days. If you don't, I won't bother you. She headed for the door, boots loud on the wooden floor. Caleb found himself standing without deciding to. Eliza. She stopped, hand on the doorframe, and looked back. Why a few days? He asked. Why not tomorrow? Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or something like hope. Because I figure you'll need time to decide if you trust me, she said. Then she walked out, and a minute later he heard hoofbeats heading back down the drive. Caleb stood in the empty kitchen, the house settling around him, and realized he was smiling. He hadn't smiled in years. The next 3 days passed slowly. Caleb worked himself harder than usual, trying to shake the restlessness that had settled into his bones. He rode fence lines until his thighs ached, chopped wood until his shoulders burned, stayed up late, going over ledgers that didn't need his attention. Nothing helped. Jack noticed, of course. He was too smart not to. You hear anything from that woman who came by? Jack asked on the third evening, casual as anything. Caleb didn't look up from the fence post he was driving into half-frozen ground. No. You expecting to? She said she'd come back in a few days. And if she doesn't? Caleb swung the post driver harder than necessary. Then she doesn't. Jack was quiet for a minute. Then he said, You like her. I don't know her. That ain't what I asked. Caleb finally looked up, sweat cooling on his forehead despite the cold. What do you want me to say, Jack? I want you to say you're willing to give someone a chance. That's all. I've given plenty of people chances. They all wanted the same thing. She didn't seem like she wanted anything. Everyone wants something. Jack shook his head. You know what your problem is? You think everyone's lying all the time about everything. You think if someone's being kind, it's because they want to manipulate you. If they're being honest, it's because they're setting up a con. You've turned yourself into a fortress, Caleb. And fortresses are real good at keeping people out, but they're also real good at keeping people trapped inside. He walked away before Caleb could answer. That night, Caleb sat in his study again, staring at the fire. He thought about Sarah, really thought about her, for the first time in years. The way she'd smiled at him, the way she'd touched his face and told him she loved him, the way she'd looked 2 months later when he'd found her in the hotel room with Thomas Garrett, wearing the necklace Caleb had given her and laughing at something Garrett had said. He'd asked her why. She'd shrugged and said, "You were a means to an end, Caleb, and the end just got better." He'd left that night, rode back to the ranch, and never spoke to her again. 6 months later, he'd heard she'd married Garrett. A year after that, he'd heard Garrett had left her for someone else. He'd felt nothing, and he'd kept feeling nothing for 8 years. Until 3 days ago, when a woman with dark eyes and no agenda sat in his kitchen and told him the truth. Eliza came back on the 4th day. Caleb was in the barn when he heard the hoofbeats, and this time, he didn't wait. He walked out to meet her, and when she swung down from her horse, he said, "You're late." She raised an eyebrow. "You were counting? You said a few days. It's been 4. 3 is a few, 4 is several." But she was almost smiling. "You want me to leave and come back tomorrow?" "No." "Good. Because it's cold as hell out here." They went inside again, back to the kitchen, and this time it felt less strange. She took off her coat and hat, hung them on the hook by the door like she'd done it 100 times before. Caleb poured coffee, and they sat in the same chairs, the same silence settling between them. But this time, the silence felt different, easier. "Tell me about your place," Caleb said. Eliza looked surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me." She considered that, turning the mug in her hands. "It's small, 40 acres, most of it scrub. I've got a dozen head of cattle, some chickens, a vegetable garden that barely grows anything. The house is 1 room with a loft. Roof leaks when it rains." "Sounds rough." "It is, but it's mine." "No help?" "Can't afford it. I do everything myself." Caleb frowned. "That's a lot for one person." "I manage." "Barely, sounds like." Her eyes flashed. "I didn't come here for pity." "I'm not pitying you. I'm just saying it sounds hard." "It is hard. But I chose it. I chose to stay after my husband died, even though everyone told me to sell and move to town. I chose to learn how to fix fences and birth calves and shoot coyotes. I chose to be alone instead of dependent." She set the mug down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. "So, yeah, it's hard, but it's honest, and that's more than I had before." Caleb watched her, something shifting in his chest. "What was he like?" "Your husband." "Charming, handsome, good at making people believe whatever he wanted them to believe." Her mouth twisted. "Including me." "How'd you meet?" "He bought land near my father's place, started courting me real deliberate. Flowers, compliments, promises about the life we'd build together. My father thought he was a good match. I thought I loved him." She shook her head. "I was 18. I didn't know any better." "And after you married?" "He changed, or maybe he just stopped pretending. He wasn't cruel exactly. He just didn't see me. I was part of the household, like the furniture, something to maintain, not someone to know." "Did you try to leave?" "Where would I go? Back to my father who'd arranged the whole thing, to town, where everyone would have called me ungrateful?" She looked at him. "You don't understand what it's like for women out here. We don't get the choices you do." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've got more freedom than anyone I've ever met. You can turn away a dozen women and nobody questions your right to do it. You can run your ranch however you want, marry whoever you want, live however you want. Nobody tells you what to do." "That doesn't mean I'm free." "Then what are you?" Caleb stared into his coffee, trying to find the words. "Trapped," he said finally, "just in a different way." Eliza leaned forward. "Then tell me. Help me understand." And for the first time in 8 years, Caleb started to talk. He told her about Sarah, about the way she'd made him feel seen, wanted, important, and then the way she'd proven it was all a lie. He told her about the parade of women after that, each one wearing a different face, but all of them wanting the same thing: his name, his money, his land. He told her about the walls he'd built, the way he'd taught himself to see through charm and flattery, the way he'd learned to trust no one. "I thought I was protecting myself," he said. "But Jack's right. I'm not protecting anything. I'm just alone." Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You think she took something from you, the woman who lied?" "She did." "No, she just showed you something you didn't want to see, that people can be cruel, that trust is a risk. But the thing about risks is, you get to choose whether you take them. She didn't take your ability to trust away. You gave it up. Caleb's jaw tightened. Easy for you to say? Is it? I spent 5 years locked in a marriage to a man who saw me as property. When he died, I could have let that define me. Could have decided all men were the same, that vulnerability was weakness, that I was safer alone. And for a while I did. But then I realized something. What? That letting one person's cruelty dictate the rest of my life was just another way of letting him control me. So I made a choice. I decided I'd rather risk getting hurt again than spend the rest of my life hiding. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the frozen land. You asked me why I came here. The truth is, I came because I'm tired of being alone. And I thought maybe you were too. Caleb stood and crossed the room until he was standing beside her. Outside, the sun was starting to set, turning the snow pink and gold. I am, he said quietly. She turned to look at him, and for the first time, he saw something in her face that wasn't patience or understanding or quiet strength. He saw hope. Then let me come back, she said, not to fix you or save you or take anything from you, just to be here, to talk, to sit in the quiet and not have to pretend we're anything other than what we are. Caleb looked at her, really looked, the way he hadn't looked at anyone in years. And what he saw wasn't someone trying to charm him or manipulate him or win him over. He saw someone just as tired, just as wary, just as hungry for something real as he was. Okay, he said. Her eyes widened slightly. Okay? Yeah, come back. When? Whenever you want. She smiled then, a real smile, small and crooked and entirely unguarded, and Caleb felt something in his chest crack open, just a little, just enough to let the light in. She came back 2 days later, just after noon, when the sun was high enough to make the snow glare white and painful to look at. Caleb was in the barn checking a mare's hoof when he heard the now familiar sound of hoofbeats on frozen ground. He set the hoof down gently, patted the mare's flank, and walked out into the light. Eliza was dismounting, and this time she didn't wait for him to speak first. I brought lunch, she said, holding up a cloth-wrapped bundle. Figured you probably don't cook much for yourself. He didn't. Most days he ate whatever the cook left in the bunkhouse or made do with coffee and whatever bread was lying around. You didn't have to do that. I know. I wanted to. She tied her horse to the post and looked at him expectantly. You going to make me stand out here in the cold, or can we go inside? They ate at the kitchen table again, the bundle revealing itself to be cornbread, cold chicken, and some kind of preserve that tasted like summer, even though it was the dead of winter. Caleb ate more than he'd intended to, and Eliza watched him with something that might have been satisfaction. When's the last time you had a decent meal? She asked. I eat fine. That's not what I asked. He thought about it. A while. You've got a cook, don't you? For the hands. I don't usually eat with them. Why not? Because I'm the boss. There's a line. Eliza made a noise that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite disagreement. Must get lonely. I'm used to it. Being used to something doesn't make it good. He looked up at her, and she met his gaze without flinching. That was becoming a pattern. The way she didn't look away, didn't soften things, didn't pretend she hadn't said what she'd said. It was unsettling and oddly comforting at the same time. You always this direct? He asked. Only with people I think can handle it. And you think I can handle it? I think you're tougher than you give yourself credit for. But I also think you're more fragile than you'd ever admit. She took a bite of cornbread, chewed thoughtfully. People can be both, you know, strong and breakable at the same time. Caleb set his fork down. You come up with that on the ride over? No, I've been thinking about it for years, just never had anyone to say it to. She paused. Until now. The kitchen fell quiet, except for the wind outside and the faint creak of the house settling. Caleb found himself noticing small things, the way Eliza's braid had come slightly loose, the calluses on her hands when she reached for her water, the fact that her coat was patched in 2 places with fabric that didn't quite match. Your place really is rough, isn't it? He said. I told you it was. Why stay? You could sell, move somewhere easier. And do what? Become someone's housekeeper? Marry some shopkeeper who'll spend the rest of his life telling me how lucky I am he took me in? She shook her head. I'd rather break my back on my own land than live comfortable under someone else's roof. That's pride talking. Damn right it is. Pride's all I've got left. Caleb studied her across the table, this woman who'd ridden 30 miles just to sit in his kitchen and tell him hard truths. I could help, he said, the words coming out before he'd fully thought them through. Eliza's eyes narrowed. Help how? I don't know. Fix your roof. Send some hands over to mend fences. Whatever you need. In exchange for what? Nothing. Nobody does something for nothing. I would. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, studying him like he was a horse she was thinking about buying. Why? Because you said we could be honest with each other. And honestly, I've got more resources than I know what to do with, and you need help. Seems simple. Nothing's simple, especially not with men like you. Men like me, rich, powerful, used to getting what you want. Her voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. You offer to help, I accept, and then what? You start showing up at my place, making suggestions, telling me how things should be done. Before I know it, you're running my life the same way you run this ranch. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. I wouldn't do that. You say that now. I mean it. Maybe you do. But I've been down this road before, Caleb. I know how it goes. A man offers help, and it comes with strings. Invisible ones at first, but they're there. And eventually they're wrapped so tight you can't move without permission. The bitterness in her voice made something twist in his chest. I'm not your husband. No, but you're still a man used to being in control. She stood up, started gathering the dishes. I didn't come here to be rescued. I came here to be seen. There's a difference. He stood too, faster than he meant to, and the chair scraped loud against the floor. Then let me see you. All of it. The broke fences and the leaking roof, and the fact that you're barely holding on. Let me see that and not think less of you for it. Eliza stopped, her hands full of plates, and looked at him. I don't want to take over your life, Caleb said, quieter now. I don't want to control you or change you or make you dependent on me. I just want to help because... He stopped, searching for the words. Because, for the first time in years, I actually give a damn about someone other than myself. And I don't know what to do with that except offer what I have. She set the plates down slowly. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it before. You really mean that? Yeah. You're not trying to buy your way into my life? No. Or prove something? Only to myself. She was quiet for a long moment, and Caleb could see her working through it, weighing his words against every experience that had taught her to be suspicious. Finally, she said, If I let you help, and that's if, it's on my terms. You don't make decisions for me. You don't show up without asking. And the second it starts feeling like something other than help, I'm done. Understand? Yeah. Say it. I understand. Your terms, your rules. She nodded once, sharp. All right then. My roof leaks over the bed. If you've got someone who knows how to patch it proper, I won't say no. I'll send someone tomorrow. Not tomorrow. End of the week. I've got things to do first. End of the week, he agreed. Something in her posture relaxed, just slightly. She picked up the plates again, carried them to the basin, and started washing them without being asked. Caleb grabbed a cloth and dried, and they worked in silence that felt almost companionable. When they were done, Eliza dried her hands on her pants and looked at him. I should go. Got a long ride back. Stay, Caleb said, then felt his face heat. I mean, stay for supper. It's a long ride, like you said, and it'll be dark soon. You can head back in the morning. I don't have anything with me. I've got spare rooms. More than I need, actually. She hesitated, and he could see the war playing out behind her eyes, the part of her that wanted to say yes fighting with the part that knew better than to trust too easily. Just supper, he said, and a place to sleep that isn't a saddle. Nothing else. Nothing else, she repeated like she was testing the words. You have my word. She looked at him for another long moment, then nodded. All right, but I'm leaving at first light. Deal. They had supper in the dining room, which felt too formal and too big, but the kitchen table seemed too small for the cook's roast and potatoes, and the pie she'd made that morning. Eliza sat across from him, and Caleb found himself hyper-aware of every sound. The scrape of forks on plates, the creak of chairs, the way she chewed thoughtfully before speaking. "This house is too big for one person," she said. "I know. Why'd your father build it so big?" "He had plans. Wanted a wife, children, grandchildren, filling up the rooms. Wanted a legacy." Caleb cut into his meat, not looking at her. "He got me instead." "What happened to your mother?" "Died when I was born. Complications." He said it flatly, the way he always did. "My father never remarried. Threw himself into the ranch instead." "That why you're so set on keeping this place running?" "Partly. Mostly I just don't know what else to do." Eliza set her fork down. "You ever think about doing something different?" "Like what?" "I don't know. Sell it, travel, start over somewhere else. This land's been in my family for 3 generations." "So? That mean you're obligated to die here?" The question landed harder than she probably meant it to. Caleb stared at his plate, suddenly not hungry. "What else would I do?" "Whatever you wanted. I don't want anything else." "Don't you?" She leaned forward. "You've spent 8 years building walls and pushing people away and convincing yourself you're fine. But you're not fine, Caleb. You're miserable. And the only reason you keep doing it is because it's easier than admitting you want something different." "You don't know what I want. Then tell me." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I want to not feel like this, like I'm going through the motions of a life instead of living one. I want to wake up and have it mean something beyond keeping the cattle alive and the books balanced. I want—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "What?" Eliza said softly. "I want what I had before Sarah ruined it. I want to believe someone could actually care about me without wanting something in return. I want to trust again." His voice cracked, just a little. "But I don't know how." Eliza reached across the table, and before Caleb could react, her hand covered his. Her palm was warm and rough with calluses, and the weight of it anchored him in a way he hadn't expected. "You start small," she said. "You let someone in a little bit at a time. You test it, see if they break your trust, and if they don't, you let them in a little more. And if they do break it, then you survive, same as you did before. But at least you tried." Caleb looked down at her hand on his, this simple gesture that shouldn't have meant anything, and somehow meant everything. "You're asking me to gamble. I'm asking you to live." They sat like that for a while, the food cooling on their plates, the house quiet around them. When Eliza finally pulled her hand back, Caleb felt the loss of it like cold water. She stood picking up her plate. "I'll help you clean up, then I should probably turn in. Early start tomorrow." They washed dishes again, and Caleb showed her to one of the guest rooms on the 2nd floor. It was neat and impersonal, the bed made with quilts his grandmother had stitched decades ago. Eliza stood in the doorway, looking around with an expression he couldn't quite read. "This is nice," she said. "If you need anything, I'll be fine." She turned to face him. "Thank you. For supper. For the room. For listening. Thank you for coming back." She smiled, small and tired. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night." He closed the door and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of her moving around inside. Then he went to his own room, lay down fully clothed on top of the covers, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. He didn't sleep, couldn't. His mind kept turning over everything she'd said, everything he'd admitted, the feeling of her hand on his. By the time pale light started creeping through the window, he'd made a decision. He found her in the kitchen, already dressed and pulling on her coat. She looked up when he came in, and something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or relief. "Thought you'd still be asleep," she said. "Couldn't." "Me neither." She finished buttoning her coat. "I should get going." "Before you do—" Caleb crossed the room, standing close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "I want to ask you something." "All right." "Will you teach me?" "Teach you what?" "How to do this. How to let someone in without feeling like I'm handing them a weapon." His throat felt tight. Because I want to, with you, but I don't remember how. Eliza looked at him for a long time, and Caleb felt stripped bare under her gaze. Then she said, I can't teach you that. Nobody can. You just have to choose to do it. Then help me choose. How? Keep coming back. Keep being honest. Keep pushing when I try to shut you out. He took a breath. And if I screw it up, when I screw it up, don't give up on me right away. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers rough against his jaw. It was the first time she'd touched him like that, deliberate and gentle, and it made his chest ache. I won't give up, she said quietly, but you have to do the same for me, because I'm just as scared as you are. Caleb, maybe more. And if this is going to work, we both have to be willing to fall. Together? Together. He covered her hand with his, holding it against his face. When will you come back? Few days. I've got work to do at my place. Let me send someone to help. End of the week. We already agreed. I know. He stopped, frustrated with himself. I want to do something. You are doing something. You're letting me in. She pulled her hand back gently. That's enough for now. She left a few minutes later, and Caleb stood on the porch watching her ride away until she was just a dark speck against the white landscape. The cold bit into his skin, but he didn't move. He stood there until he couldn't see her anymore, and even then he stayed a while longer, just breathing. Jack found him there an hour later, half frozen and staring at nothing. You all right, boss? Jack asked. Yeah. That woman leave? Yeah. She coming back? Yeah. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he clapped Caleb on the shoulder and said, Good. The days between Eliza's visits developed a rhythm. She'd arrive mid-morning or early afternoon, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but herself. They'd talk in the kitchen, or if the weather wasn't too brutal, walk the property together. She asked him about the ranch, the cattle, the decisions he made. He asked her about her place, her struggles, the way she'd learned to survive alone. They didn't talk about the future, didn't make promises or plans. They just existed in the present, testing the waters, learning each other's edges. True to his word, Caleb sent 2 of his best men to fix Eliza's roof at the end of the week. They came back reporting that it wasn't just the roof. The whole place was held together with spit and determination. Caleb offered to send them back to do more work. Eliza refused. I said the roof, she told him the next time she visited. Don't push it. I'm not pushing. I'm offering. Same thing. It's not. It is when you're used to people taking over. She softened just a little. I appreciate what you did. The roof's solid now, but if you keep trying to fix everything, I'll stop coming. That's not fair. Life's not fair. You know that better than anyone. He did, so he backed off, even though it killed him to know she was struggling and he had the means to help. But he was learning, slowly, painfully, that helping wasn't always about fixing. Sometimes it was just about being there. 3 weeks in, Eliza showed up with a black eye. Caleb saw it the second she dismounted and felt rage flood through him so fast it made his vision blur. Who did that to you? She touched her face gingerly. Nobody. I was fixing a fence and the post snapped back. Caught me good. You're lying. I'm not. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, taking her face in his hands and tilting it toward the light. The bruise was dark purple, swelling, closing her eye halfway. There were scrapes on her cheekbone, too, consistent with wood or maybe a rope. You're sure? He said, his voice deadly quiet. I'm sure. Jesus, Caleb, let go. You're hurting me. He dropped his hands immediately, stepping back. Sorry, when I saw that, I thought, you thought someone hit me. This? Yeah. And you were ready to kill them. Yeah. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Nobody's ever cared enough to get that angry on my behalf. Well, I do. I can see that. She touched her eye again, wincing. It looks worse than it is. Hurts like hell, though. Come inside. I'll get you some ice. They sat in the kitchen while Caleb pressed a cloth-wrapped chunk of ice against her face. Eliza bore it stoically, but he could see the pain in the set of her mouth, the tension in her shoulders. You need to be more careful, he said. I'm as careful as I can be when I'm doing everything myself. Then let me help. Caleb, I know what you said. I know your rules, but this is ridiculous. You're going to seriously hurt yourself. And for what? Pride? Yes, for pride. Because it's mine. She pulled the ice away, glaring at him with her good eye. You don't get it. You've never had to fight for every scrap of independence you have. You were born with it. I had to claw my way to it, and I'm not giving it up just because it's hard. I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to let someone share the load. And what happens when you decide you're done sharing, when you get tired of the broke woman with the failing ranch and move on to someone easier? Caleb set the ice down. Is that what you think? That I'm going to get tired of you? I think people leave. That's what they do. They stay until it stops being fun or easy or profitable, and then they go. And I'd rather be alone on my own terms than abandoned on someone else's. I'm not going to leave. You don't know that. Yes, I do. How? He didn't have an answer for that, not one that wouldn't sound like empty promises or naive hope. So instead he said, because I know what it's like to be left, and I wouldn't do that to someone else. Eliza looked at him, really looked, and he saw her armor crack just slightly. You mean that? Every word. She was quiet for a moment, then picked up the ice and pressed it back to her face. If I let you send help, real help, not just a quick fix, you don't get to make decisions. You don't get to tell me how to run my place or what to do with it. Your people work under my direction. Agreed? Agreed. And if at any point it starts feeling like you're taking over, I'm done. No second chances. Understood. And you still don't get to fix everything. Some things I need to do myself. I can live with that. She studied him, then nodded slowly. All right. Send them next week. I'll have a list ready. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. Caleb had to fight to keep the relief off his face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might regret it when you see how much work needs doing. I doubt that. She smiled just a little, and even with the black eye and the scrapes, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness and everything to do with strength. They spent the rest of the afternoon on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching the sun track across the sky. Eliza told him about her childhood, growing up on a hardscrabble farm with 3 brothers who left as soon as they were old enough. Caleb told her about learning to run the ranch from his father, who was better with cattle than people and showed love through practical lessons instead of words. Did you love him? Eliza asked. Your father? Yeah, I think so. I respected him anyway, which might be the same thing. It's not. How would you know? Because respect is what you give someone for what they do. Love is what you feel for who they are. She pulled the blanket tighter. Did he know you? The real you? Not just the son who'd inherit the ranch? Caleb thought about it. No, I don't think he did. That must have been lonely. It was. Still is, sometimes. Not right now, though. He looked at her, this woman who'd crashed into his carefully controlled life and refused to play by any of the rules he'd set. No, not right now. As the sun started to set, painting the snow in shades of pink and orange, Eliza stood and stretched. I should head back before it gets full dark. Stay, Caleb said. It was getting easier to say, each time less weighted with everything it implied. Can't. I've got chickens to feed and cattle to check on. Then come back tomorrow. I'll come back when I can. When's that? She smiled. When I can. He walked her to her horse, helped her mount, even though she didn't need the help. Before she rode off, she looked down at him and said, Thank you for getting angry, for caring enough to want to protect me. Nobody's done that in a long time. You shouldn't have to protect yourself from everything. Maybe not, but I'm glad I know how. She touched her heels to the horse's flanks. See you soon, Caleb. He watched her go, and this time when Jack found him on the porch afterward, he didn't ask if Caleb was all right. He just stood there beside him, and they watched the stars come out together. The men Caleb sent to Eliza's place came back 3 days later with reports that made his jaw clench. The fence lines were a disaster, rotted posts, sagging wire, gaps big enough for cattle to wander through. The barn had a corner that was starting to collapse. The well pump was held together with wire and hope. One of them, a weathered hand named Marcus, pulled Caleb aside and said quietly, "Boss, I don't know how she's keeping that place running. It's a miracle it hasn't fallen down around her ears. Can you fix it?" "Most of it, yeah, but it's going to take time and money. Do it, whatever it takes." She's got opinions about how things should be done. Strong ones. Then listen to them. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Because she's doing some things the hard way when there's easier options. If that's how she wants it done, that's how you do it. Understand?" "Yes, sir." When Eliza came by next, nearly a week later, she looked exhausted. There were shadows under her eyes, and her hands were wrapped in bandages. "What happened?" Caleb asked, reaching for her hands before she could pull away. "Barbed wire. Caught me while I was helping your men with the fence. You're supposed to be directing them, not doing the work yourself. I'm not going to stand around watching while other people fix my property." "Why not?" "Because it's mine. I need to know it's done right." He unwrapped the bandages carefully, revealing cuts across her palms that were red and angry. "These need cleaning. I cleaned them. Not well enough." He led her inside, ignoring her protests, and spent the next 20 minutes cleaning and rebandaging her hands while she gritted her teeth and didn't complain once. "You're going to work yourself to death," he said as he tied off the last bandage. "Better than sitting idle. There's a middle ground. Not for me." He looked up at her, frustrated and worried, and something else he didn't want to name yet. "Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" "Because easy things never last. Difficult things, the ones you have to fight for, those stick." She flexed her fingers, testing the bandages. "You should know that better than anyone." She was right, and it irritated him that she was right, but he was learning to sit with that irritation instead of lashing out. "You're impossible. So are you." "Maybe that's why this works." "Maybe." She stood, wincing slightly. "I need to get back." "Stay the night. You're exhausted." "I've been exhausted for 5 years. I'll survive." "Eliza, don't." She cut him off, but not unkindly. "Don't try to take care of me like I'm fragile. I'm not. I'm tired and broke and stubborn as hell, but I'm not fragile. If you can't see the difference, this isn't going to work." Caleb stood too, facing her. "I see the difference. I'm just trying to figure out how to care about someone without trying to fix all their problems. You start by asking what they need instead of assuming you know." "Fine. What do you need?" She looked at him for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer. "I need you to trust that I know my own limits, and I need to know that when I do hit those limits, you'll be there. Not to take over, but to catch me if I fall. I can do that." "Can you?" "I'm trying. That's all I'm asking." She left shortly after, and Caleb stood in the empty kitchen feeling like he'd just fought a battle he wasn't sure he'd won or lost. But he was still standing, and so was she, and maybe that was enough for now. The next 2 weeks settled into a pattern that felt almost normal. Eliza came by every few days, sometimes staying for an hour, sometimes for most of the afternoon. They talked, argued, sat in comfortable silence. Caleb's men made steady progress on her place, and slowly, grudgingly, Eliza started to relax about accepting help. She even laughed once, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and surprised them both. They'd been sitting on the porch, and Caleb had told her about the time one of his hands tried to impress a girl by riding a notoriously mean bull and ended up in the water trough instead. The laugh had burst out of Eliza like something that couldn't be contained, and when she realized what she'd done, she'd covered her mouth like she'd committed a crime. "Don't," Caleb had said. "Don't hide it. I haven't laughed like that in years." "Then do it more often." She'd looked at him with something in her eyes that made his heart skip. "Maybe I will." But as winter deepened and the work on her place continued, Caleb started to notice things. The way Eliza flinched sometimes when he moved too quickly. The way she always positioned herself near an exit. The way she watched him when she thought he wasn't looking, like she was waiting for him to turn into someone else. He didn't bring it up. Not at first, but it gnawed at him, this evidence that no matter how much progress they made, she still didn't fully trust him. And maybe she never would. One afternoon in late February, when the wind was howling and the snow was coming down sideways, Eliza showed up drenched and shaking. Caleb took one look at her and pulled her inside, wrapping her in blankets and building up the fire until the room was almost too warm. "What happened?" he asked, crouching in front of her. "Horse through a shoe. Had to walk the last 5 miles. In this weather? You could have died." "But I didn't." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" "The point is, you keep putting yourself in danger because you're too stubborn to ask for help." "I don't need help." "Yes, you do. We all do." "That's not weakness, Eliza. That's being human." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw tears. "If I start needing people, I'll forget how to survive without them. And then when they leave, because they always leave, I won't know how to stand on my own anymore." Caleb took her face in his hands, gentle as he'd ever been. "I'm not going to leave." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true. You don't know what the future holds." "No, but I know what I want it to hold." He brushed a tear away with his thumb. "I want it to hold you, and me, and whatever we build together. And I want to stop being so damn scared all the time that it's going to fall apart." "How do we do that?" "I don't know. But I think we start by staying, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, and Caleb felt something shift between them, something fundamental and irrevocable. When she opened her eyes again, they were clear. "I'm scared," she said. "Me too." "But I'm staying anyway." "Me too." And there in the warmth of the fire, with the storm raging outside and the future uncertain, they held on to each other and chose not to let go. She stayed that night, and the one after, the storm making travel impossible. They fell into a routine that felt dangerous in its simplicity. Breakfast together at the kitchen table, afternoons spent near the fire while the wind tried to tear the house apart, evenings playing cards or just talking until the words ran out. Caleb gave her one of his shirts to sleep in since her clothes needed drying, and the sight of her in it did something to his chest he wasn't ready to examine. On the third morning, the storm finally broke. Eliza stood at the window, watching pale sunlight struggle through the clouds, and said, "I need to get back, check on things. I'll ride with you." You don't have to." "I know. I want to." She turned to look at him, and there was something new in her face. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. "All right." They rode out together an hour later, the world transformed into something alien and beautiful. Snow had drifted against every structure, smoothing the landscape into rolling waves of white. The cold was sharp enough to make breathing hurt, but the sky was clear for the first time in days. Eliza's place looked worse than Caleb remembered. The repairs his men had made stood out against the general decay like new patches on old fabric. But there was smoke coming from the chimney, which meant someone had kept the fire going, and when they got closer, Caleb saw Marcus coming out of the barn. "Figured you'd be stuck at the boss's place," Marcus called out. "Checked on your animals? They're all right, fed and watered." Eliza dismounted, and Caleb saw her shoulders relax slightly. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Boss would have had my head if anything happened to them." Marcus tipped his hat to Caleb. "Speaking of which, the fence line on the north side needs attention before the snow melts. Posts are rotted clean through." "How bad?" Eliza asked. "Bad enough that you'll lose cattle if we don't fix it soon." She closed her eyes briefly, and Caleb saw her doing calculations in her head. Time, money, effort, all things she didn't have enough of. "We'll get it done," Caleb said. "I can't afford—" "I'm not asking you to pay for it. Consider it part of the original deal." "There was no original deal." "Then consider it a favor." "I don't like owing favors." Marcus cleared his throat. "I'll just go check the barn again," he said, and disappeared before either of them could respond. Eliza turned on Caleb, arms crossed. "You can't just keep throwing money at my problems." "I'm not throwing money. I'm preventing a disaster." It's my disaster to prevent." "Why does it have to be yours alone? Why can't it be ours?" The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Eliza stared at him, mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the right argument. "There is no ours," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't there? Caleb stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. We've been doing this for 2 months now. You come to my place, I help with yours. We talk, we share meals, He stopped, searching for the right words. We're building something, Eliza, and I don't know what to call it, but it's real. And it's ours. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. For the first time in 8 years, I know exactly what I'm saying. He took a breath. I care about you. Not your land, not what you can give me, not some idea of what you should be. Just you. And that means your problems are my problems, whether you like it or not. That's not how it works. Why not? Because... She stopped, frustrated. Because I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to let someone care without it turning into control. Then we'll figure it out together, make new rules, ones that work for both of us. She looked at him for a long moment, and Caleb could see the war playing out behind her eyes. Finally, she said, If we fix the fence, I work alongside your men. I don't just stand around watching. Fine. And you don't get to tell me I'm doing it wrong. Even if you are? Especially then. He smiled despite himself. Deal. They spent the next week working on the fence line, and Caleb learned more about Eliza in those cold, brutal days than he had in all their conversations. He learned she was stronger than she looked, able to drive posts and string wire with an efficiency that came from years of practice. He learned she had a stubborn streak a mile wide and would rather collapse than admit she needed a break. He learned she sang while she worked, old songs he half recognized, her voice rough but true. And he learned that watching her was dangerous, because every time she laughed at something Marcus said or wiped sweat from her forehead despite the cold, Caleb felt something tighten in his chest that went beyond caring and into territory he wasn't ready to name. On the 5th day, she hit her thumb with the hammer and let out a string of curses that would have made his ranch hands blush. Caleb was beside her in seconds, taking her hand and examining the rapidly swelling digit. It's fine, she said through gritted teeth. It's not fine. It's already turning purple. I've had worse. That doesn't make this better. He wrapped her thumb carefully, using strips torn from his own shirt since they'd forgotten to bring medical supplies. You need to be more careful. I was being careful. The post shifted. Then let someone else do it. No. Eliza, I said no. She pulled her hand back, cradling it against her chest. I know you mean well, Caleb. I know you want to help, but I need to do this. Not because I'm stubborn, though I am. Because every fence post I drive, every board I nail, every piece of this place I fix with my own hands. It's proof that I can. That I'm not helpless. That I don't need a man to survive. No, I'm not trying to make you need me. Aren't you? Because it feels like that sometimes. It feels like you're trying to make yourself necessary. The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Caleb sat back on his heels, looking at her swollen thumb and the determination in her face. Maybe I am, he admitted. Maybe I'm scared that if you don't need me, you'll realize you don't want me either. Eliza's expression softened. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? I don't know. I've never done this before. This thing where two people choose each other without obligation or necessity, where it's just want. She flexed her injured hand, wincing. But I do know that me being able to fix my own fence doesn't mean I don't want you around. It just means I'm fixing my own fence. So what do you want from me? I want you to stand next to me, not in front of me. I want you to hand me tools, not take them away. I want you to trust that I know when I need help and will ask for it. She met his eyes. And I want you to know that when I do ask, it's not because I'm weak. It's because I trust you. Caleb nodded slowly. I can do that. Can you really? I'm learning. So am I. They went back to work, and Caleb made a conscious effort to step back, to let her struggle when she needed to struggle, to offer help only when she asked. It went against every instinct he had, but he did it anyway, because she'd asked him to. Because learning to care about someone meant learning how they needed to be cared for, not imposing his own ideas of what that should look like. By the time they finished the fence line, March had arrived with its false promises of spring. The snow was melting in fits and starts, turning the ground to mud that sucked at boots and made every step an effort. Eliza's place was looking better. Not good, but better. The roof didn't leak, the fences held. The barn stood straight, and something else had changed too. Something harder to name. Caleb noticed it in the way Eliza looked at him sometimes, when she thought he wasn't paying attention. In the way she'd started touching him, small things, casual things, a hand on his arm when she wanted his attention, fingers brushing his when she handed him something. In the way she'd stopped flinching when he moved too fast. He noticed it in himself too. The way his day felt incomplete if he didn't see her. The way he caught himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering what she was doing, if she'd eaten, if she was warm enough. The way his house felt too empty when she wasn't in it. They were having supper at his place on a Thursday evening when Jack knocked on the dining room door, hat in hand and expression serious. "Sorry to interrupt, boss, but there's someone here to see you." Caleb frowned. "Who?" "Says her name's Sarah Mitchell, used to be Sarah Garrett." The name hit like a physical blow. Caleb felt the blood drain from his face, his hands going cold. Across the table, Eliza had gone very still. "Tell her I'm not available, Caleb said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "I did. She says she'll wait. Says it's important." Jack shifted his weight. "She's in the front parlor." Caleb stood, his chair scraping loud against the floor. "I'll handle it." "Caleb?" Eliza started, but he was already moving toward the door. "Stay here. This won't take long." He walked through the house on legs that felt disconnected from his body, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. 8 years. 8 years since he'd seen her, since he'd heard her voice, since she'd ripped his world apart with a smile on her face. She was standing by the window when he entered the parlor, backlit by the dying sun. She'd aged. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, a hardness to her mouth. But she was still beautiful in that calculated way, still carried herself like someone who knew exactly how attractive she was. "Caleb," she said, turning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough." His voice was flat. "What do you want?" "Is that any way to greet an old friend?" "We're not friends. We're nothing. Say what you came to say and leave." The smile faltered. "I heard you've been turning away every woman who comes to your door. Thought maybe you were still carrying a torch." "You thought wrong." "Did I?" She took a step closer, and Caleb fought the urge to step back. "Because, from what I hear, you haven't let anyone get close. No wife, no children, nothing but this ranch and your anger." "My life is none of your concern." "Maybe not, but I thought you deserved to know the truth." "About what?" "About why I did it, why I chose Thomas over you." She clasped her hands in front of her, the picture of contrition. "I was young and stupid and scared. You were so intense, Caleb, so serious about everything. Thomas was fun, exciting, different, but I didn't love him. I loved you." Caleb laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "You're lying." "I'm not. I made a mistake, a terrible one, and I've regretted it every day since." "Where is Thomas now?" Something flickered across her face. "Gone. Left me for a girl half his age 3 years ago. Took everything that wasn't nailed down." She moved closer, reaching for his hand. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I thought maybe, after all this time, we could start over, try again." Caleb pulled his hand away like she'd burned him. "You're out of your mind." "I'm desperate. I have nothing, Caleb. No money, no home, no prospects. Thomas left me with debts I can't pay and a reputation I can't fix. You're the only person I could think of who might what? Take you in? Marry you? Pretend the last 8 years didn't happen?" His voice rose, anger flooding through him hot and fierce. "You didn't come here because you love me. You came here because you're broke, and you think I'm stupid enough to fall for your act twice. It's not an act. I really do. Get out. Caleb, please. I said get out now, before I have you thrown out." Sarah's face hardened, the mask slipping. "You'll regret this. You're going to die alone in this big empty house, and when you do, you'll remember that I gave you a chance to have something real." Something real? Caleb moved to the door, holding it open. I know what real looks like now, and it's nothing like you. She stared at him for a long moment, then grabbed her coat and swept past him, head high. You always were a fool, Caleb Thornridge. I hope whoever you think you found knows what a cold, bitter man you've become. She was gone a moment later, the front door slamming behind her. Caleb stood in the empty parlor, shaking, his hands clenched into fists. He could hear his own breathing, ragged and too fast, could feel the rage and hurt and old betrayal churning in his gut. Caleb? He turned to find Eliza standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. You heard, he said. Most of it. She came into the room, moving slowly like she was approaching a spooked horse. Are you all right? Yeah, no, I don't know. He ran his hands through his hair, pulling hard enough to hurt. She had some nerve showing up here, acting like we could just... She hurt you. 8 years ago, yeah. No, just now. She hurt you just now. Eliza stopped in front of him, searching his face. And you sent her away. Of course I sent her away. Did you think I wouldn't? I don't know what I thought. I just know that she's the woman who broke your heart. And she was standing in your house asking for a second chance, and part of me wondered if what? If I'd take her back after everything? Caleb grabbed Eliza's shoulders, holding her gaze. I wouldn't. Not in a million years. Not for anything. Why not? Because she's not you. The words came out raw and honest, and Caleb saw Eliza's eyes widen. He released her shoulders, stepping back, suddenly uncertain. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have... Don't. She caught his hand, holding tight. Don't apologize for telling the truth. It's too soon. We're not... What are we, Caleb? He looked at her, this woman who'd shown up out of nowhere and refused to fit into any of the boxes he'd prepared, who challenged him and frustrated him and made him want things he'd sworn off, who stood beside him instead of in front of him or behind him, who met him as an equal even when it was hard. I don't know, he admitted, but I know it's real, and I know I don't want to lose it. You won't. How can you be sure? Because I'm choosing to stay, even though you're difficult and stubborn and damaged. Even though this scares me more than anything I've ever done, I'm choosing you. Caleb pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her and burying his face in her hair. She smelled like wood smoke and soap and something uniquely her, and he held on like she might disappear if he let go. I'm choosing you too, he said against her temple. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need, but I want to try. Then try. That's all I'm asking. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the growing dark. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, but inside it was warm and still and safe. When they finally pulled apart, Eliza touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. Tell me about her. The real story, not the version you've been telling yourself. They went back to the kitchen, and Caleb told her everything. The whole ugly, painful truth of it, how he'd met Sarah at a dance in town, how she'd singled him out with a smile that made him feel chosen, how they'd courted for 6 months, how he'd talked about marriage and a future and all the things he'd never talked about with anyone, how he'd believed every word she said, every touch, every promise. I found them by accident, he said, staring into his coffee. I was in town for supplies, stopped by the hotel to meet a buyer. Their door was open just a crack. I heard her laughing, heard his voice. I pushed the door open without thinking, and there they were. What did you do? Nothing. I just stood there like an idiot while they scrambled to cover themselves. Thomas was laughing, actually laughing, like it was all a big joke. And Sarah... He stopped, the memory still sharp enough to cut. She looked at me like I was interrupting something, like I was the one in the wrong for being there. Did you say anything? I asked her why. She told me. He met Eliza's eyes. She said I was a stepping stone, that Thomas had more money, better connections, more potential, that she'd been planning to break things off with me anyway, but this was easier. That's cruel. Yeah, but it was honest at least. She didn't try to spare my feelings or make excuses. She just told me the truth, that I wasn't enough. He set his cup down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. And the worst part is I believed her. For 8 years, I've believed that I wasn't enough, that there was something wrong with me that made it easy for her to choose someone else. Eliza reached across the table, taking his hand. There's nothing wrong with you. How do you know? Because I see you, the real you, not the version you show the world. And what I see is someone worth choosing, someone worth staying for. She squeezed his hand. She didn't leave because you weren't enough. She left because she was too small to see what she had. Caleb felt something break open in his chest, something he'd been holding tight for too long. I don't know how to let go of it, the anger, the hurt, the fear that it'll happen again. You don't have to let go all at once. You just have to stop letting it control you. She paused, choosing her words carefully. What happened to you was real. The pain was real. But you can't live the rest of your life punishing every woman who walks through your door just because one of them was cruel. That's not protecting yourself. That's just giving her power over you forever. I hate that you're right. I know. They sat in silence for a while, the house settling around them. Finally, Caleb said, When she left just now, I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not hurt, not even satisfaction. I just wanted her gone so I could get back to you. That's good. Is it? Yeah, it means you're moving on. It means she doesn't have the power to hurt you anymore. Eliza stood, carrying her cup to the basin. It means you're healing. I don't feel healed. You're not yet, but you're getting there. She stayed that night again, and the night after that. They didn't talk about it, didn't make it into something more than it was, just two people choosing to be in the same space, finding comfort in proximity. Caleb lent her more clothes, and she started leaving things behind without meaning to, a comb on the bureau, a jacket on the hook by the door. His house, which had felt too big for as long as he could remember, started to feel like the right size. One morning, nearly 2 weeks after Sarah's visit, Caleb woke to find Eliza already up and dressed, standing at the window and watching the sunrise. He lay there for a moment, just looking at her, the way the early light caught in her hair, the set of her shoulders, the fact that she was here at all. You're staring, she said without turning around. How did you know? I can feel it. She glanced at him over her shoulder, a small smile playing at her mouth. You're not as subtle as you think. He sat up, scrubbing his hands over his face. What are you thinking about? How different things are now. From a few months ago, I mean. She turned to face him fully. I came here thinking I'd offer you some company, maybe have a few conversations, then go back to my life. I didn't expect this. This? You, us, whatever this is. She crossed her arms, not defensive, but thoughtful. I didn't expect to care this much. Caleb stood, crossing the room until he was close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. Does that scare you? Terrifies me. Me too. But you're not running. Neither are you. She smiled, and it transformed her face into something that made his heart skip. Guess we're both stubborn. Or stupid. Maybe both. He kissed her then, unable to stop himself, and she kissed him back with a fierceness that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eliza pressed her forehead to his and said, We're going to screw this up, you know. We're going to fight and hurt each other and make mistakes. Probably. And we're going to have to figure out how to live with that, how to mess up and still choose each other anyway. I can do that if you can. I'm willing to try. Then that's enough, Caleb said, and meant it. They spent the rest of the morning working on her place. There was always something that needed fixing, some new problem that cropped up just when they thought they'd gotten ahead of things. But it felt different now, working side by side with the understanding that this wasn't temporary, that they were building something that might actually last. Around noon, Marcus rode up with news that one of the cattle had gotten itself stuck in a ravine on the far edge of Eliza's property. They rode out together, the three of them, and spent 2 hours getting the damn thing free, cold, muddy, exhausted work that left them all filthy and laughing despite themselves. On the ride back, Marcus dropped back to ride beside Caleb and said quietly, She's good for you, boss. I know. You're different with her. Less, he searched for the word, less alone. Caleb looked ahead to where Eliza rode, straight-backed and confident, completely at home on horseback. Yeah, I am. You gonna marry her? The question caught him off guard. I don't know. Haven't thought that far ahead. Maybe you should. Woman like that doesn't come along twice. Caleb thought about it as they rode back. About marriage, commitment, the future. About what it would mean to tie his life to someone else's, to make promises he'd have to keep. The old him, the one from 6 months ago, would have shut down the thought immediately, would have found a dozen reasons why it was a bad idea, why it couldn't work, why he was better off alone. But that version of himself felt distant now, like someone he used to know but didn't quite recognize anymore. That night, after Marcus had gone and Eliza was washing up for supper, Caleb stood in his study staring at the safe where he kept his mother's ring. He hadn't looked at it in years, hadn't wanted the reminder of what marriage was supposed to be and what his father had lost. But now he opened the safe and pulled out the small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a single stone. It wasn't flashy, wasn't expensive by the standards of the women who'd come courting. But it was real, and it was his to give. And looking at it now, he could almost see it on Eliza's hand. Almost. He closed the box and put it back. Not ready yet, but no longer convinced he never would be. Supper was quiet, both of them tired from the day's work. Afterward, they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Eliza leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and Caleb wrapped an arm around her and pulled her close. Tell me something true, she said quietly. Like what? Anything, something you've never told anyone else. He thought about it, sifting through 8 years of carefully guarded secrets. I used to wish my father had lived longer, not because I needed his help with the ranch, but because I wanted him to see me succeed, to know that I could do it. He paused. But now I'm glad he didn't, because I think he would have been disappointed in how I handled Sarah, in how I let it break me. You didn't let it break you. It broke you, and then you survived. That's different. Doesn't feel different. That's because you're still in the middle of it, but one day you'll look back and see it for what it was, something that happened to you, not something that defines you. She tilted her head back to look at him. Now you tell me something true. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words were out before he could stop them, raw and unguarded. Eliza went very still, and Caleb felt panic rise in his throat. Too soon, too much, too... I know, she said softly. I'm falling too. Relief flooded through him so fast it made him dizzy. Yeah. She turned in his arms, facing him fully. And it scares the hell out of me because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to love someone without losing myself. We'll figure it out. Will we? We've figured out everything else so far. She laughed, shaky but real. Barely. Barely's good enough. They kissed again, slower this time, and when they finally went inside, the house felt different, charged with possibility, heavy with the weight of what they'd admitted. Eliza went upstairs to the guest room like she always did, but this time Caleb stood in the hallway outside his own door and listened to her move around and wondered how much longer they'd keep pretending that separate rooms made any kind of sense. Not long, he suspected. Not long at all. The pretending lasted 3 more days. On the 4th night, Caleb woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. He sat up, reaching instinctively for the rifle he kept beside the bed, then heard Eliza's voice, quiet and strained. Caleb? You awake? He was out of bed in seconds, opening the door to find her standing there in his borrowed shirt, her face pale in the dim light from the window. What's wrong? I can't sleep. Keep having... She stopped, wrapping her arms around herself. Bad dreams. He didn't ask what about, just stepped aside and said, Come in. She hesitated for only a moment before crossing the threshold. Caleb closed the door behind her and watched as she stood in the middle of his room, looking uncertain for the first time since he'd known her. I don't want to be alone right now, she said quietly. You're not. He gestured to the bed. Stay here. I'll take the chair. That's not, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded and climbed into the bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. Caleb grabbed a blanket from the chest and settled into the armchair by the window, trying to find a position that didn't make his back ache. This is stupid, Eliza said after a few minutes. What is? You sleeping in a chair when there's a perfectly good bed. I'm fine. You're not. I can hear you shifting around. She sat up, the covers falling away. Just get in the bed, Caleb. I trust you. The words hit him harder than they should have. He stood slowly, crossed to the bed, and lay down on top of the covers, keeping a careful distance between them. Eliza made a frustrated noise and grabbed his arm, pulling him closer until his side pressed against hers. There, she said. That's better. It was better. Too much better. Caleb could feel the warmth of her through the thin fabric of the shirt, could smell her hair, could hear her breathing evening out as she relaxed against him. He lay very still, afraid that if he moved, he'd do something stupid like pull her closer or bury his face in her neck or tell her everything he'd been thinking for weeks. Tell me about the dream, he said instead. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, I was back in my old house, with him, and I couldn't leave. Every time I tried to walk out the door, I'd end up back inside. He kept telling me I was ungrateful, that I should be happy with what I had, and I believed him. Her voice cracked slightly. I believed I deserved to be trapped. Caleb turned on his side, facing her. In the moonlight, he could see tears tracking down her cheeks. You didn't deserve that. Any of it. I know that now. But in the dream, I forget. I forget everything I've learned, everything I've survived. I'm just that scared girl again, believing she has no choices. You have choices now. Do I? She looked at him, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. Because sometimes this feels like a dream too, like I'm going to wake up back in that one-room house with the leaking roof and realize none of this was real. That you weren't real. Caleb reached out, wiping the tears from her face with his thumb. I'm real. This is real. How do you know? Because dreams don't hurt this much. They don't scare you or challenge you or make you want things you swore you'd never want again. He moved closer until their foreheads touched. This is messy and complicated and terrifying. That's how I know it's real. She kissed him then, desperate and seeking, and Caleb kissed her back with everything he'd been holding inside. They broke apart breathing hard, and Eliza said, I don't want to be careful anymore. I don't want to keep pretending we're not doing exactly what we're doing. What are we doing? Falling, both of us. She cupped his face in her hands. So let's fall together instead of trying to catch ourselves every step of the way. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other in the darkness. Afterward, Eliza curled against him, her head on his chest, and Caleb held her like she might dissolve if he loosened his grip. Stay, he said into her hair. I am staying. No, I mean stay here, move in. Stop going back to that broken down place and just stay. She went still. Caleb, I know it's fast. I know we're supposed to take things slow and be sensible. But I'm tired of waking up alone. I'm tired of watching you ride away and wondering when you'll come back. I want you here, with me, all the time. I can't just abandon my place. Then we'll fix it up proper and rent it out. Or keep it as a backup. I don't care. I just want you here. She pulled back enough to look at him. You're asking me to give up my independence. I'm asking you to share your life with me. There's a difference. Is there? Because it feels like you're asking me to become part of your world instead of us creating something new together. The words stung because she was right. Caleb sat up, running his hands through his hair. You're right. I'm doing it again, trying to fix things my way instead of asking what you need. What I need is for this to be ours, not yours. For me to have a say in how we build this life, not just fit into the one you've already made. She sat up too, pulling the sheet around herself. I'll stay, but not in the guest room, and not as someone you're taking care of. As your partner, you're equal. You are my equal. Then treat me like one. Ask me what I want instead of telling me what you think I need. Fine, what do you want? She thought about it, and Caleb watched emotions play across her face. Fear, hope, determination. "I want to sell my place, Rhian," she said finally. "Put the money into fixing up this one, making it ours instead of just yours. I want a say in how the ranch is run. Not because I know better than you, but because if this is going to be my home too, I need to be part of it. Done." Just like that? Just like that. "You're not going to argue? Tell me I'm being unreasonable?" "Why would I? You're right." He reached for her hand. "I've been running this place alone for 11 years. Maybe it's time I had a partner." She squeezed his hand hard. "I'm going to mess up. I don't know anything about running an operation this size." "Then we'll learn together. I'll teach you about cattle and contracts and all the boring parts. You teach me how to stop being such a stubborn ass." That surprised a laugh out of her. "That might take longer than the cattle lessons." "Probably." They lay back down, tangled together, and talked until the sun started to rise. They talked about her place and what it might sell for, about how to merge their lives without losing themselves, about the future in a way that felt both terrifying and possible. When morning light finally filled the room, Caleb looked at this woman in his bed and felt something shift into place. Not perfect, not easy, but right. They told Jack over breakfast, and the old foreman just nodded like he'd been expecting it. "About damn time," he said, refilling his coffee. "Thought you two were going to dance around it forever." "We weren't dancing," Caleb said. "The hell you weren't. Watching you two was like watching two cats circle each other, all that sniffing and backing away and pretending you weren't interested." He looked at Eliza. "You sure about this? Boss here can be a real pain in the ass." "I'm aware," Eliza said dryly. "Lucky for him, so can I." "Fair enough." Jack raised his cup. "Welcome to the madhouse." The next few weeks were chaos. Eliza put her place up for sale, and to everyone's surprise, it sold within a week to a young couple just starting out. The money wasn't much, but it was enough to make improvements to Caleb's house. New furniture for the parlor, repairs to the porch, a bigger stove for the kitchen. Eliza insisted on paying for half of everything despite Caleb's protests, and they had their first real fight over a set of curtains she wanted to buy. "They're too expensive," Caleb said. "They're my money. I'll spend it how I want. But we don't need—" "I need them. I need to feel like I'm contributing, not just living off your charity. It's not charity if we're together. Then let me pay for the damn curtains." They bought the curtains. They also bought new bedding, a dining table that didn't wobble, and a rocking chair for the porch that Eliza claimed immediately as her own. The house started to look lived in instead of maintained, and Caleb found he liked the change. But integrating Eliza into the ranch operations proved harder. The hands didn't know how to act around her. She wasn't the boss's wife, not officially, but she wasn't just a guest either. And Eliza's insistence on learning everything from scratch created tension when there was work to be done. "I'm slowing everyone down," she said one night, frustrated after a particularly difficult day. "They'd be better off if I just stayed out of the way." "They're adjusting. Give them time." "How much time?" "Because I feel useless, Caleb. Like I'm playing at being a rancher instead of actually being one." "You are being one. You're just learning. I'm 32 years old. I shouldn't need to learn basic things." "Why not? I had to learn your world too. How to fix a roof proper, how to string fence without cutting myself to ribbons, how to doctor cattle on my own." He pulled her into his arms. "We're teaching each other. That's the whole point." She softened against him. "I hate feeling incompetent." "I know, but you're not. You're just new." The breakthrough came a month later when one of the cattle got sick. The vet was 2 towns over and wouldn't arrive until the next day, and Caleb was ready to write the animal off. But Eliza spent 6 hours in the barn with it, using remedies she'd learned from her father and sheer, stubborn determination. By morning, the cow was standing, and by the time the vet arrived, it was already improving. Word spread fast among the hands. By supper that night, they were treating Eliza differently, not as the boss's woman, but as someone who'd proven herself worth respecting. "That was a good thing you did," Jack told her. "Smart thinking." Eliza ducked her head, embarrassed. "Just did what needed doing. That's what makes you good at this. You don't overthink it. You just do it." Caleb watched the exchange with something warm spreading through his chest. This was what he'd wanted without knowing he wanted it. Eliza fitting into his world not by erasing herself, but by being exactly who she was. Spring gave way to early summer, and the ranch hummed with activity. Caleb and Eliza fell into a rhythm that felt almost natural, working together during the day, sitting on the porch in the evenings, falling into bed exhausted and content. They still fought, sometimes spectacularly, but they were learning how to fight fair, how to repair the damage, how to apologize without ego getting in the way. One evening in late May, Caleb found himself standing in his study with the ring box in his hand again. He'd been thinking about it for weeks, turning the idea over in his mind like a stone he was examining for flaws. Marriage. Commitment. The legal and spiritual binding of two lives. It terrified him. But the thought of not asking terrified him more. He found Eliza in the barn, brushing down her horse after the day's work. She looked up when he came in, smiling in that way that still made his heart skip. "Thought you were doing the books," she said. "I was. Got distracted." "By what?" "By this." He held out the box. Eliza's hand stilled on the brush. "Caleb, just listen. I know this is fast. I know we haven't even been together 6 months. I know there are 100 reasons to wait, to be sensible, to make sure this is really what we both want." He opened the box, showing her the ring. "But I also know that I wake up every morning grateful you're there. I know that working beside you makes the work matter in a way it never did before. I know that when I think about the future, you're in every part of it." She set the brush down carefully, her eyes on the ring. "That's your mother's." "Yeah." "You're really asking me this?" "Yeah." "Even though I'm stubborn and difficult and still learning how to run a ranch? Especially because of that." She looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm scared, Caleb. What if I'm not good enough at this? What if I can't be the partner you need?" "What if you can? What if we spend so much time being scared that we miss out on something real?" He stepped closer, still holding the box open. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be mine. And let me be yours. That's all. That's everything. I know." She was quiet for a long moment, and Caleb felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Then she said, "Ask me proper." He dropped to one knee in the dirt and straw of the barn floor, holding the ring up to her. "Eliza Hart, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me and fight with me and drive me crazy and let me love you for as long as we both live?" "Yes." The word came out choked. "Yes, you stubborn, impossible man. Yes." He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along, and then he stood and pulled her into his arms. She was crying and laughing at the same time, and Caleb felt something in his chest crack wide open, letting light flood into places that had been dark for 8 years. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I should have said it before. I love you." "I love you too." She pulled back to look at him, her face wet with tears. "Even though you proposed in a barn. Where else would I propose? We've had most of our important conversations in barns." "That's true." She looked at the ring on her finger, turning her hand to catch the light. "When? When what? When do you want to get married?" Caleb thought about it. About big weddings and small ones, about waiting and not waiting, about what actually mattered. "Tomorrow?" She laughed. "That's insane." "Is it? We're already living together. We're already running the ranch together. We're already committed. Why wait? Because people need invitations and preparations, and people can come as they are. We'll do it simple. Just us and whoever wants to show up." He cupped her face. "I've wasted 8 years being afraid to want something. I don't want to waste another day." She searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her nod. "All right, tomorrow. But I'm wearing trousers." "I wouldn't expect anything else." They were married the next afternoon under the cottonwood trees that lined the drive, with Jack standing witness and a handful of ranch hands in attendance. Eliza wore her best trousers and a white shirt she'd borrowed from Caleb's closet, and Caleb wore the only suit he owned that still fit. The circuit preacher happened to be passing through town and agreed to perform the ceremony for a nominal fee. It was quick and simple and perfect in its imperfection. When the preacher pronounced them married and Caleb kissed his wife for the first time, he felt the last piece of the wall around his heart crumble away. That night, They had supper with the ranch hands in the bunkhouse, drinking whiskey and telling stories until the stars came out. Jack pulled Caleb aside at one point and said, "Your father would be proud, you know. Not of the ranch or the money, of this, of you finally letting yourself be happy." "You think?" "I know. He loved your mother something fierce, and when he lost her, part of him went with her. But he always hoped you'd find that for yourself. Find someone worth the risk." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, boss." Caleb looked across the room to where Eliza sat laughing at something Marcus was saying, her face bright and open in a way he'd never seen in those first careful months. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I did." Later, back in the house that was finally theirs instead of just his, Caleb and Eliza stood in the bedroom and looked at each other with something like wonder. "We really did it," Eliza said. "Having second thoughts?" "No. Just trying to believe it's real." She touched his face, her rough fingers gentle against his skin. "A year ago, I was alone on a failing ranch, convinced I'd die there. And now you're stuck with me." "Stuck with you," she agreed. "For better or worse." "Probably more worse than better, knowing us. Definitely." She kissed him softly. "But I wouldn't change it. Any of it. Even the hard parts. Not even the parts where I was an ass? Especially not those. They made the good parts matter more." They made love that night as husband and wife, and it felt both familiar and entirely new. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Caleb said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing up. For being stubborn enough to keep coming back. For seeing something in me worth saving. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just refused to let you do it alone." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "That's what love is, I think. Not rescuing each other, but standing beside each other while you both figure out how to rescue yourselves." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You were just too stubborn to notice." He laughed, the sound rusty but real, and pulled her closer. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed in the darkness. The ranch settled around them, solid and real, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Caleb Thornridge felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. Not because all his problems were solved. They weren't. But because he'd finally stopped running from the one thing he'd wanted all along: connection, trust, love. And he'd found it with a woman who refused to let him hide, who challenged him and frustrated him and made him want to be better than he was. "What are you thinking?" Eliza murmured, half asleep. "That I'm glad you rode up that morning. That I'm glad you were stubborn enough to keep trying even when I tried to push you away. That I'm glad—" His voice cracked. "I'm glad you chose me. I'll keep choosing you. Every day. Even the days when you drive me crazy. Same. Promise?" "Promise." She fell asleep in his arms, her breathing evening out into the steady rhythm he'd come to know. Caleb lay awake a while longer, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, feeling the weight of her against him. The house creaked and settled, familiar sounds that used to make him feel lonely, but now just felt like home. Tomorrow, there would be work to do. Fences to mend, cattle to move, 1,000 small tasks that made up the daily rhythm of ranch life. There would be arguments and setbacks and moments of doubt. There would be hard seasons and lean times and all the challenges that came with building a life together. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, Caleb Thornridge held his wife in his arms and finally understood what his father had been chasing all those years. Not perfection, not some idealized version of love that existed only in stories. Just this: the simple, complicated, messy reality of two imperfect people choosing each other anyway. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The first real test came 3 weeks after the wedding. Caleb was going over the books in his study when Jack knocked and entered without waiting, his face grim. "We've got a problem." Caleb looked up. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves the bank and a lot of money we don't have." Jack tossed a letter onto the desk. "Thomas Garrett's creditors are coming after anyone he had dealings with. Apparently he borrowed against some joint ventures you two had going back before—" He stopped, glancing toward the door where Eliza had just appeared. "Before what?" she asked, stepping into the room. Caleb picked up the letter, his stomach sinking as he read. Before Sarah. Before everything went to hell. He looked up at Jack. How much are they claiming I owe? $20,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Eliza's eyes went wide. That's more than we have liquid. More than I can raise without selling off a significant portion of the herd. Caleb set the letter down carefully, his hand steady, even though his insides were churning. And if I sell now, in early summer, I'll get half what they're worth. Can you fight it? Eliza asked. Maybe, but lawyers cost money too, and there's no guarantee I'd win. Thomas was good at making things look legitimate on paper. He stood, walking to the window. I thought I was done with his poison. Thought when Sarah left, that was the end of it. Eliza crossed to him, taking his hand. We'll figure it out. We? He looked at her. This isn't your problem. The hell it isn't. We're married. Your problems are my problems now, remember? I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. She squeezed his hand. What do we have? What can we work with? They spent the next 2 hours going through the books, laying out every asset, every debt, every possible source of funds. It wasn't enough. Even if they sold Eliza's ring, even if they mortgaged the house, even if they called in every favor owed, they'd still be short. There has to be another way, Eliza said, staring at the numbers spread across the desk. There isn't. Not unless I want to lose everything my father built. Caleb slumped in his chair, feeling the weight of it crushing down on him. Maybe I should just sell. Cut my losses, pay off the debt, start somewhere else. No. Eliza's voice was sharp. You don't mean that. Don't I? What's the point of holding on to land if it bankrupts me, if it destroys everything I've worked for? The point is that this place is yours. It's part of who you are. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let Thomas Garrett take that away from you too. What else can I do? She was quiet for a moment, then said, You could ask for help. Caleb laughed bitterly. From who? I've spent 8 years pushing everyone away, being too proud to need anyone. Who the hell would help me now? You'd be surprised. Jack spoke from the doorway where he'd been standing quietly. You've got hands who've worked for you for years, neighbors who remember your father, people in town who respect what you've built here, even if you've been an ass about accepting friendship. I can't ask my ranch hands to loan me money. Not loan, invest. Jack came into the room, pulled up a chair. Offer them shares, small ones but real. Give them a stake in this place beyond just wages. Some of them have savings. Some of them have been here long enough to want to see it succeed. Caleb stopped. That's actually not a terrible idea. I know. I have them occasionally. Jack looked at Eliza. And you've got your people too. The couple who bought your place. They seemed solid. Maybe they'd be willing to invest in a proven operation. It could work, Eliza said slowly. It's not traditional, but nothing about us is traditional. No, Caleb agreed, looking at her. It's not. They spent the next week reaching out, having conversations Caleb never thought he'd have. He sat down with each of his ranch hands individually, laying out the situation honestly, making no promises he couldn't keep. Some said no. They had families, obligations, their own struggles. But more said yes than he dared hope. Small amounts mostly, but they added up. Marcus contributed $500. I've been here 12 years, he said. This place feels like mine too in a way. I'd like to keep it that way. The couple who'd bought Eliza's place came by and offered $3,000. You helped us get started, the young man said. Seems only fair we return the favor. Jack surprised everyone by contributing $2,000 of his own. Your daddy was good to me, he said when Caleb tried to refuse. This is me paying that forward. Even people Caleb barely knew came forward. The blacksmith in town, the woman who ran the general store, a rancher 2 properties over who'd always been more competitor than friend. Why? Caleb asked the rancher, genuinely confused. We've never been close. No, but you've never been dishonest either. And this territory needs operations like yours. Keeps land values stable, keeps the economy moving. Your failure would hurt all of us. The man held out his hand. So consider this enlightened self-interest. Caleb shook it, humbled in a way he'd never experienced. The hardest conversation was with Eliza's father, who she'd been estranged from since her marriage. They rode 2 days to reach his small farm, and when he answered the door, his weathered face showed surprise and something that might have been hope. "Eliza, didn't expect to see you again." "I didn't expect to come." She gestured to Caleb. "This is my husband, Caleb Thornridge. We need to talk to you about something." They sat at a table that wobbled on uneven legs, and Eliza laid out the situation with brutal honesty. Her father listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. "So you want money," he said when she finished. "I want a chance to make this right, to keep the life I've built." Eliza's voice was steady, but Caleb could see her hands trembling. "I know I left angry. I know I blamed you for marrying me off to a man who didn't love me, but I also know you did what you thought was right." "I did." Her father's voice was rough. "And I've regretted it every day since. Your mother told me I was making a mistake, but I didn't listen. Thought I knew better." "Did she?" Eliza stopped. "Is she?" "She's fine. Ornery as ever. She's visiting your aunt right now, or she'd be here telling me I'm a fool for not helping you immediately." He stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a tin box. "I've been setting money aside. Figured someday you might need it, though I never thought you'd ask." He counted out bills. More than Caleb had expected, more than they'd hoped for. "It's not a fortune, but it's yours. No conditions, no expectations. Just a father trying to make up for past mistakes." Eliza took the money with shaking hands, then stood and hugged him, the first time Caleb had seen her initiate physical contact with anyone but him. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you, even when I went about it the wrong way." On the ride back, Eliza was quiet. Caleb let her be, understanding that some things needed silence. Finally, as the sun was setting and they were making camp for the night, she said, "I judged him too harshly. He made mistakes. So did I. I held on to anger for years, convinced he'd ruined my life, but he was just trying to take care of me the only way he knew how." She looked at Caleb across the fire. "We're all just doing the best we can with what we know, aren't we?" "Yeah, and sometimes our best isn't good enough, but it's all we have." "Do you think Sarah's father felt like mine did? Like he'd failed her by pushing her toward men like you and Thomas?" Caleb considered it. "I don't know. I never thought about it from that angle. I was too busy being angry at her." "Are you still angry at her?" "No." The realization surprised him. "I think I stopped being angry the day she showed up and I felt nothing. Or maybe the day I married you and realized she'd actually done me a favor." "How do you figure?" "If she hadn't left, I never would have built the walls that you had to tear down. And tearing them down, letting you in, that made this mean something. Made me appreciate it in a way I never would have if it had come easy." Eliza smiled, small and sad. "That's either very wise or very broken." "Can it be both?" "Yeah, I think it can." They made it back 3 days later with enough money to pay off the debt and still have a small cushion. Caleb wrote the check with hands that didn't shake, feeling something shift in his chest as he sealed the envelope. "It's done," he said to Eliza, who'd been standing beside him the entire time. "How do you feel?" "Lighter and heavier at the same time." He looked at her. "I owe so many people now, not just money that I can pay back, but gratitude, trust, the kind of debt you can't settle with a check. So don't settle it, just live up to it. Be the man they believed in when they gave you that money." "What if I can't?" "Then you fail trying, which is better than succeeding at being alone." The summer passed in hard work and careful management. Caleb found himself in the unfamiliar position of having partners, small ones, silent ones, but partners nonetheless. He started holding quarterly meetings where he'd update the investors on the ranch's progress, answer questions, take suggestions. Some of it was useful. Some of it was ridiculous. All of it was humbling. "You've changed," Jack observed one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch. "Have I?" "You listen now. Actually listen. Instead of just waiting for people to stop talking so you can do what you were going to do anyway." Eliza's influence. "Partly, but mostly it's you finally figuring out that being strong doesn't mean being alone." Caleb thought about that as Eliza came out to join them, settling into the rocking chair that had become hers. She'd changed too, filled out a little now that she wasn't half starving, carried herself with a confidence that came from knowing she belonged. "What are you two conspiring about?" she asked. "Nothing," Jack said, standing. "Just telling your husband he's not as much of an ass as he used to be. High praise coming from you. Don't let it go to his head. He's still got plenty of ass left in him." Jack tipped his hat and headed toward the bunkhouse, whistling. Eliza looked at Caleb. "You do seem different lately. Good different or bad different?" "Just different. More settled, maybe? Like you finally stopped waiting for everything to fall apart." "Have I?" "I don't know. Have you?" Caleb thought about it, really thought about it. For 8 years he'd been braced for disaster, convinced that anything good would inevitably turn sour. But sitting here with his wife, with the ranch running smoothly despite the debt they'd narrowly escaped, with people who'd chosen to invest in his future, he realized the waiting had stopped. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I have." The breakthrough came in September, when the first frost touched the grass and the air turned sharp with the promise of winter. Caleb was in the barn when he heard shouting from the yard. He ran out to find one of the younger hands, a kid named Peter, standing over Marcus with fury on his face. "You had no right," Peter was saying, "no right to go behind my back like that." "I was trying to help," Marcus said from the ground, his nose bleeding. "I didn't ask for your help." Caleb stepped between them. "What the hell is going on?" "He told my father I was wasting my wages gambling," Peter spat. "Got me cut off from my inheritance." "Because you were wasting your wages gambling," Marcus said, struggling to his feet. "I watched you lose a month's pay in one night, kid. Someone had to do something." "That wasn't your decision to make." "No, but it was the right thing to do anyway." Marcus wiped blood from his face. "You can hate me for it if you want, but at least you won't end up broke and desperate in a few years." Peter's hands clenched into fists, and Caleb saw the kid was genuinely considering taking another swing. "Enough," Caleb said, his voice hard. "Peter, you're off for the rest of the day. Marcus, get that nose looked at. We'll talk about this later when everyone's calmed down." "There's nothing to talk about," Peter said. "I quit." "No, you don't. You're angry and you're embarrassed and you want to burn everything down because that feels easier than admitting Marcus might be right." Caleb crossed his arms. "I know because I've been there. And I'm telling you now, walk away if you want, but you'll regret it. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. You don't know anything about me. I know you're talented with horses. I know you work hard when you're not pissing away your money. And I know you're scared that everyone sees you as a screw-up, so you're trying to prove them right before they can be disappointed." Caleb's voice softened slightly. "But that's just another way of giving up, and you're better than that." Peter stared at him, jaw working. Finally, he said, "I need time to think." "Take it. But don't take too long. Job's here if you want it." The kid left and Marcus sagged against the fence post. "Thanks, boss." "Don't thank me. You still should have talked to me before going to his father." "I know. I saw him heading down the same road my brother went down. And my brother ended up dead in a ditch with his throat cut over a gambling debt." Marcus looked at Caleb. "I couldn't watch it happen again." "I understand, but you can't save people by controlling them. You can only offer them a way out and hope they're smart enough to take it." Eliza had watched the whole thing from the porch, and when Caleb came up the steps, she said, "That was good. What you said to Peter." "Was it? Because I have no idea if it'll work." "It will. Maybe not today, but it will. Because you didn't try to fix him or judge him. You just told him the truth and gave him space to figure it out." She stood, wrapping her arms around him. "You're getting good at this." "At what?" "Being the kind of man people can rely on without feeling like they're losing themselves." "I learned from the best." She pulled back to look at him. "We learned from each other. That's what makes this work." "Seeing mon bastul sata." Peter came back 2 days later, hat in hand, and asked if the job was still available. Caleb said yes. The kid didn't thank him, didn't apologize, just got back to work. But over the next few weeks, Caleb noticed him sitting with Marcus at meals, noticed the two of them talking quietly by the barn. Whatever had broken between them was mending, slowly, in the way things did when people chose to stay instead of run. Winter came early that year, hard and fast, locking the world in white and cold. But the ranch was ready for it, stores laid in, fences reinforced, cattle moved to winter pastures. And the house was warm, filled with the kind of life it had been built for, but never quite achieved. Caleb and Eliza spent long evenings by the fire, talking or reading or just sitting in companionable silence. They made love with the slow familiarity of people who knew each other's bodies, who'd learned what made the other gasp or sigh or laugh. They fought about stupid things, how to organize the pantry, whether to buy more cattle or invest in equipment, whose turn it was to feed the chickens, and learned to fight without cruelty, without weapons meant to wound. "I hate when you do that," Eliza said one night after a particularly frustrating argument about whether to hire another hand. "Do what?" "Shut down. Go quiet like you're trying to wait me out instead of actually engaging." "I'm not shutting down. I'm thinking. You're avoiding. There's a difference." She sat down beside him on the bed. "If you disagree with me, say so. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why. But don't just go silent and hope I'll drop it. I don't want to fight." "I know, but sometimes fighting is how we figure things out. Not screaming or throwing things, just honest disagreement. It doesn't mean we don't love each other." Caleb looked at her, at this woman who refused to let him hide even after months of marriage. "You're right about the hand. We do need another one. I was just being cheap." "See? That wasn't so hard." "Yes, it was. Admitting I'm wrong is always hard." "I know, but you're getting better at it." She kissed him softly. "We both are." In January, a letter arrived from Sarah. Eliza brought it to Caleb where he was working in the barn, her expression carefully neutral. "You don't have to read it," she said. "I know." He took the envelope, turning it over in his hands. "But I'm going to." He opened it there, with Eliza standing beside him, and read the cramped handwriting that he'd once known so well. "Caleb, I know I have no right to write to you. I know I burned every bridge between us 8 years ago, but I wanted you to know that I'm leaving the territory, going east to live with a cousin. Thomas left me with nothing, and I have nothing left to stay for. I heard you got married. I hope she makes you happy in ways I never could. I hope you've forgiven me, though I haven't forgiven myself. I was young and stupid and cruel, and I can't take any of it back, but I can at least tell you I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth. Sarah." Caleb read it twice, then handed it to Eliza. She scanned it quickly, then looked at him. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Sad for her, maybe, but not for me. Not anymore." He took the letter back, walked to the small stove in the corner of the barn, and tossed it in. "That part of my life is done. I don't need her apology, and I don't need to carry her guilt." "You're not even a little bit angry?" "No, I'm just tired of letting her take up space in my head." He turned to Eliza. "You're what matters now, this life we're building. Everything else is just noise." She smiled, slow and genuine. "Good, because I was getting tired of competing with a ghost." "You were never competing. You won the second you showed up." "Damn right I did." Spring arrived with the usual chaos of calving season and fence repairs and all the work that came with shaking off winter. But this year felt different to Caleb. The ranch hummed with purpose, with people working not just for wages but because they had a stake in the outcome. The debt was slowly being paid down, the investors were seeing returns, and the operation was growing in ways Caleb had never imagined when he'd been running it alone. One morning in late March, as the snow was finally melting for good, and the first green shoots were pushing through the mud, Caleb stood at the gate where Eliza had first ridden up over a year ago. He remembered that day with perfect clarity. The suspicion, the walls, the absolute certainty that she was just another woman looking to take something from him. He'd been so wrong. Eliza found him there, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "What are you thinking about? About how different things are now, how different I am. You're not that different, still stubborn, still difficult. But now you let people in, you trust, you believe in things beyond just survival." She rested her chin on his shoulder. You're living instead of just existing. Because of you. Because of both of us. Because we chose to be brave. She turned him around to face her. I have something to tell you. Something in her tone made his heart skip. What? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and perfect. Caleb stared at her, his mouth opening and closing without sound. You're, yeah, about 3 months, near as I can figure. She searched his face. Say something. I don't know what to say. He stopped, overwhelmed. Are you happy? Terrified. But yeah, happy. She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. Are you? Caleb felt something crack open in his chest, something even bigger than when she'd agreed to marry him. A child. Their child. The future made real in a way he'd never let himself imagine. Yeah, he said, his voice rough. I'm happy. I'm so damn happy I don't know what to do with it. She laughed, and the sound was bright and clear in the morning air. Well, you've got about 6 months to figure it out. They told Jack that evening, and the old foreman actually teared up. A baby in this house. Your daddy would have loved that. Would he? Caleb asked. I don't even know if I know how to be a father. Nobody does until they do it. You'll learn, just like you learned everything else. Jack raised his glass. To new beginnings, and to the future of the Thornridge Ranch. The Thornridge Heart Ranch, Eliza corrected. We talked about this. The Thornridge Heart Ranch, Jack amended with a grin. Even better. The months that followed were a blur of preparation. They converted one of the spare rooms into a nursery, Eliza insisting on painting it herself despite Caleb's protests. They bought a cradle from a craftsman in town, soft blankets from the general store, all the tiny impossible things a baby would need. How are we supposed to keep something this small alive? Caleb asked one night, holding up a gown that would fit in his palm. The same way we keep everything else alive. Careful attention, hard work, and blind faith that we're doing it right. Eliza took the gown from him, folding it carefully. You're going to be a good father. You don't know that. I do. Because you're already worrying about it. Bad fathers don't worry. I don't want to mess this up. You will. We both will. But we'll also get it right sometimes. And we'll be there for each other when we fail. She put her hand on his cheek. That's what makes this work. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep trying. The baby came in early October, 3 weeks before they'd expected. Caleb was out checking the herd when Jack came riding up fast, his face pale. It's time. Eliza's asking for you. Caleb rode back harder than he'd ever ridden, fear and excitement warring in his chest. He found her in their bedroom, the midwife already there, and for the next 12 hours he learned what helplessness really meant. He held Eliza's hand while she screamed and pushed and wept, feeling utterly useless but refusing to leave. I can't, she gasped at one point. I can't do this. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. I'm not strong. I'm tired. I want to stop. You can't stop, but you can rest, just for a minute. Then we'll try again. And they did, over and over, until finally the midwife said, One more push, that's all. One more. Eliza bore down with a sound that seemed to come from somewhere primal and ancient, and then suddenly there was crying, high and thin and furious. It's a girl, the midwife said, holding up the tiny red-faced creature. A healthy girl. Caleb stared at his daughter, this impossible thing that he and Eliza had created, and felt something fundamental shift in the universe. The midwife cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket, then placed her in Eliza's arms. Hello, Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hello, little one. I'm your mother. And I'm your father, Caleb added, touching the baby's impossibly tiny hand. And we're going to mess up a lot, but we're going to love you. That much we know how to do. They named her Anne, after Caleb's mother. She had Eliza's dark eyes and Caleb's stubborn chin, and from the first moment she made it clear she had opinions about everything. She cried when she was hungry, refused to sleep when she was tired, and had a grip like iron when she wrapped her tiny fingers around Caleb's thumb. She's perfect, Jack said the first time he held her. She's a tyrant, Caleb corrected, watching his daughter's face scrunch up in preparation for another bout of crying. Same thing when they're this small. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. The ranch still needed running. The investors still needed updates. The cattle still needed tending. But now there was also the baby, feeding schedules and diaper changes, and the 1,000 small, impossible tasks that came with keeping a tiny human alive. Caleb learned to function on no sleep, to change diapers one-handed while holding a bottle in the other, to calm a screaming infant at 3 in the morning while Eliza caught a few desperately needed hours of rest. "I don't know how you did this alone," he said to Eliza one exhausted morning. "I didn't. I had help, and now you do too." She smiled, tired but genuine. "We're a team, remember? Best team I've ever been on. Only team you've ever been on. Still counts." As winter approached again, Caleb found himself standing at that same gate once more, Anne bundled against his chest in a sling Eliza had fashioned. The baby was sleeping, her tiny fists curled against his shirt, her breath warm through the fabric. This was where it had started. This gate, this moment of Eliza riding up out of nowhere with no agenda but honesty. If someone had told him then that a year later he'd be married with a daughter, that he'd have partners and friends and a life that felt full instead of empty, he never would have believed it. But here he was, living proof that people could change, that walls could come down, that love was worth the risk, even when every instinct screamed to protect yourself. Eliza came out to join him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "You'll freeze out here." "I'm fine. Just thinking." About? About how far we've come, how different everything is. Better different? Yeah, better. He looked at her, this woman who'd refused to give up on him even when he'd given her every reason to. "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing up, for staying, for teaching me that being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. You taught yourself that. I just refused to let you do it alone." She leaned against him, careful not to wake the baby. "Besides, you taught me things too." "Like what?" "That accepting help doesn't make you dependent. That building something with someone else can be stronger than building it alone. That love doesn't have to be perfect to be real." She looked up at him. "We saved each other, Caleb. That's what makes this story worth telling." They stood like that for a long time, the three of them, while the sun climbed higher and the ranch woke around them. There would be challenges ahead, there always were. Hard winters and failed crops and all the 1,000 ways life could go wrong. There would be fights and doubts and moments where they'd wonder if they were strong enough to keep going, but they'd face them together. Not as two people trying to survive alone, but as partners who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust someone else with your scars. Inside the house, the fire was burning. Outside, the land stretched endless and unforgiving and beautiful. And there at the gate where everything had changed, Caleb Thornridge held his daughter and his wife, and finally understood what his father had been chasing all those years. Not perfection. Not some fantasy of what life should be. Just this. The messy, complicated, utterly human reality of choosing to stay. Of building something real with someone brave enough to see your worst parts and care about you anyway. Of letting go of who you'd been so you could become who you needed to be. The gate stood open behind them, welcoming instead of forbidding. And for the first time in 8 years, Caleb wasn't afraid of who might come through it, because he'd learned the hardest lesson of all, that isolation wasn't strength, that walls weren't protection, that the only way to truly live was to risk being hurt, to trust being betrayed, to love being loved in return. He'd learned it from a woman on horseback who'd seen through every defense he'd built and chosen him anyway. And in learning it, he'd found everything he'd been afraid to want: a home, a family, a future. And standing there with the morning sun on his face and his daughter's heartbeat against his chest, Caleb Thornridge was finally, completely, imperfectly whole.